I was never the kind to believe in dark omens or cursed land, but the older you get, my child, the more you understand that there are things in this world that whisper through the leaves. Things that move in silence when no one's watching, and that sometimes, when the wind shifts just right, they start watching back. You see, I come from a long line of Romani women storytellers, dreamers, and keepers of secrets. My grandmother, may the stars cradle her soul, used to say, Zora. Some lands are not meant to be walked, they are meant to be left alone, but I was young once. Foolish, curious, and that curiosity led me to a place I should have never gone. It was a land far from any town, tucked deep between old hills in the countryside of Minas, where the sun feels heavy and the nights have no voice. A friend of mine, bless his naive heart, had inherited a rural property from his grandparents. He invited me to stay there for a few days. "It'll do you good," he said. "Fresh air, silence, peace." But what I found there was none of those things. The first time I laid eyes on the place, it looked harmless, quiet. Beautiful, even. A sea of green hills. A sky so open it swallowed you whole. And yet, there was a weight in the air. Not fear exactly, but something ancient. Something still. The kind of stillness that makes you feel like the world is holding its breath. I stayed alone in that house. The first few days were peaceful enough. I would read, walk through the trails, sip tea on the old wooden porch. At night, I'd sit in silence, letting the wind carry away my thoughts. But silence has a way of revealing what hides behind the noise of life. And it wasn't long before I realized I was not alone. One night, as the sky turned to ink and the crickets began their song, I heard it. A rustling not like an animal scurrying through the grass. No, it was deliberate, rhythmic, like steps. Like someone or something was brushing against the edge of the forest that kissed the back of the house, then a whisper, so soft it was barely there, but I heard it, a woman's voice. Faint and cold, as if carried from another world. I told myself it was nothing, the wind perhaps, my imagination, but the next night it happened again, same time, same place, same whisper. I remember the third night clearly. I took my lantern and approached the woods the moment the light hit the trees. The sound stopped, everything froze, the forest was so silent. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. The darkness between the trunks felt deeper than night itself. From then on, things changed. I began to wake up and find objects moved. My grandmother's ring, once left beside the lamp, now sitting in the middle of the floor. A wooden spoon spinning slowly in the sink. A candle burned halfway down that I had not lit. And always that feeling. That unbearable feeling of eyes on me. One afternoon, while walking toward the nearby fields, I crossed paths with a local farmer. He was a quiet man, rugged by the sun, gentle in his demeanor, but when I mentioned where I was staying, his face changed. He looked down, muttered under his breath, and said only this, "Be careful, that place remembers." That night, the knocking began. Soft at first. Gentle tapping at the door, like a bird's beak or a child's fingers. I froze. Who would be there at that hour, in the middle of nowhere? Then I heard it, a voice. Let me in, just for a moment, sweet, delicate, but hollow. Like a song sung without a soul behind it. I did not open the door. The knocking stopped, but the silence that followed was not peace, it was a warning. And so began the longest, darkest nights of my life, nights where I heard her pacing around the house, nights when the wind carried voices not meant for this world, nights when something scraped against the walls. Dragging long nails along the wood, I didn't sleep, I couldn't, and the less I slept, the more the house changed. The shadows deepened, the air thickened, and the scent of something old wet earth, mould, and roses long dead began to rise from the floorboards. I needed answers. I drove into the village. Asked questions the locals didn't want to answer, but an old shopkeeper, tired of holding it in, finally told me the truth. The land had once belonged to a family known for dark rituals, the kind that summoned things they couldn't control. Something was left behind, she told me. Something that doesn't know it's dead, and with those words, my dear, I understood. This was not just a haunted house, it was a hungry one. I should have left that night, packed my things and driven off before the mist returned. But when you're alone in a place like that, fear doesn't always scream, it whispers. And it convinces you, maybe it was all in your head. But it wasn't. The next night, the knocking came again. This time, louder, angrier. The door shook with every hit, and I sat on the floor with my back pressed against it, praying to every saint and spirit I knew. Not the ones in books, but the old ones. The ones my grandmother whispered to with herbs in her hands and fire in her eyes. Then the voice returned. Let me in, only this time it didn't ask. It commanded. Open. My hand moved against my will, as if strings had been tied to my bones, pulling me toward the doorknob. I fought it, I swear to you. I fought it with every ounce of strength I had left. My lips whispered my grandmother's old Romani blessings, the ones she only used when death walked nearby. And then a scream, not mine. A scream from the other side of the door. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something in between. The kind of sound that rots your courage from the inside out. I fell back, heart racing, and the knocking stopped. But the silence that followed was not empty. It was watching. By dawn, I was no longer the same woman. My hands trembled like leaves in autumn, and my dreams had turned to ash. That morning, I packed my bags, ready to flee. But something made me pause, something in the corner of my vision. There, in the mirror above the fireplace, was a shape. Not mine, it was her, the woman whose voice had haunted the nights, pale, hollow-eyed, and standing behind me. I turned nothing. But when I looked back at the mirror, she was still there, smiling. That smile was not joy, it was hunger. I ran, I drove straight into town. Heart pounding with every mile. I found a man, a scholar of the old ways. He studied folklore, spiritual geography, sacred lines of energy, a man with more stories than teeth. When I told him about the site, his face went pale. There are places, he said, where the veil between this world and the next is paper-thin. That land, it is one of them. He told me of ley lines, of intersections of energy so potent that time twists and opens like a wound. He said that spirits there don't just haunt, they attach. They follow. I asked him if I was cursed. He didn't answer. Instead, he opened a dusty book wrapped in red cloth and showed me an old Romani sigil, one used not to banish spirits, but to keep them at bay. A symbol of warning, a seal of do not enter. That same sigil was carved into the wood above the door of the old house, but it had been scratched out. Something had removed the warning. And now it was loose. We returned together to the house the following evening. The sun was setting, the hills swallowing light faster than we could prepare. The scholar drew protection circles with salt and ashes. He recited prayers in a tongue older than both of us. I added my grandmother's words. Spoken with trembling lips, we entered the house. It was colder than it had any right to be. The air hung heavy with grief. Shadows crawled along the walls, not fleeing from the light but reaching toward it. Then we heard it, steps. Not outside, above us. In the attic. We climbed the staircase, every step creaking beneath our weight. The air grew thinner. harder to breathe. My lungs burned, but I pressed on. At the top, the door to the attic was open, though I knew I had left it sealed. Inside, the room was empty almost. On the floor in the center was a circle of melted wax, broken bones, and old photographs burned at the edges. The scholar examined them, whispering that this was no ordinary haunting. This was a summoning. And not one of protection, but of invitation. Someone brought her here, he said. And now she won't leave. I asked who. He looked up at me, eyes wide with realization. Maybe not who, what? Suddenly, the attic door slammed shut. We were plunged into darkness. The only light came from my lantern, flickering violently. A cold hand brushed the back of my neck, though no one stood behind me. And then, the voice again. You shouldn't have come back, Zora. She knew my name. She knew me. The scholar began chanting, louder now, throwing powder into the air that burned with red sparks. The symbols on the wall began to glow, faint and trembling. Something was fighting back. I collapsed to the floor, sobbing, not just in fear, but in grief, because I understood. This entity wasn't born from the house. It had followed my bloodline, and it had waited for me. The moment she spoke my name, I knew this was no accident. This spirit, this thing, it wasn't some nameless wanderer from beyond. It had roots, history, and somehow it was tied to me. The scholar helped me down from the attic. I could barely breathe. My bones trembled. Not from fear, but from recognition. I had felt that cold before. Not in this lifetime, but somewhere deep, buried in my spirit's memory. Back in the main room, we examined the charred photos from the ritual circle. One of them showed a woman. Her face was cracked from fire, but I saw her eyes. Pale, hollow, with that same hungry stare. The scholar gasped softly. I've seen her, he said, in an old book on Romani history. They called her La Viva das Sombras, the widow of shadows, banished from her clan for using forbidden magic. She was said to commune with spirits not of this world, offering blood for power. And curses for betrayal. I stared at the image in silence. And something flickered in the back of my mind, a story my grandmother once told me, whispered under candlelight when I was still too young to understand. About a woman who turned against her people, who cursed her own bloodline so that no daughter would ever escape her watch. The curse was sealed, my grandmother said, in earth soaked with sorrow. That earth was beneath my feet. I looked up at the scholar, my voice cracking. She was one of us, he nodded. And she never left. He believed she had been bound to the land for generations. That when the old sigil was scratched off the doorway, the seal was broken. Freed from her prison, she searched for the one whose blood still sang the old song "Me, why me?" Because I am the last daughter of our line to carry the knowledge. Because I still speak the words. Because I still believe. She found me because I was the doorway she needed. We returned to town, and for days I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face hovering just beyond the veil of dream. Her voice echoed in my ears, not just begging to be let in, but telling me secrets I was never meant to hear. I tried burning sage. I recited every prayer I knew. I called upon the spirits of my ancestors, but the dreams only got worse. And then came the mirror. I awoke one morning to find every mirror in my house shattered. All except one, the small oval mirror my grandmother had left me. The one wrapped in red cloth, hidden beneath my bed since the day she died. I unwrapped it, hands shaking, and for a moment I saw nothing. Then her reflection, standing behind me, whispering, "You carry my name." I dropped the mirror and fell to my knees. I screamed so hard my throat burned. I clawed at the floor, trying to make sense of it all. But deep down, I knew. She wasn't just a ghost. She was family. Somewhere, generations ago, a pact had been made, one so dark it was erased from stories and songs. But magic doesn't forget, it waits, and blood remembers what the mind tries to bury. The scholar returned the next day with a desperate plan, a ritual not of exorcism, but of reconciliation. You must face her, he said, not with anger, not with fear, but with truth. You must uncover what was lost, or she will never rest. I gathered what little I had, tokens from my lineage, a necklace of bones, a jar of ash, a scarf once worn by my great-grandmother. We drove back to the house at dusk. That land, it welcomed me, as if it had been waiting. The sun disappeared too quickly. Shadows crawled faster than they should. We stepped inside, and the air grew heavier with every breath. In the center of the house, we drew a new circle: salt, herbs, and blood. Mine. I whispered the names of the women who came before me, tears falling into the earth. Then I called her. I said her true name. The name we were never supposed to say. And she came. She emerged from the wall itself, her shape forming like smoke, becoming solid. Her eyes burned. Her mouth didn't move, but I heard her voice in my soul. Zora, what do you want? I asked. She drifted toward the edge of the circle, but could not cross it. Her form flickered: mother, daughter, child, widow, changing, shifting. I want to come home. I fell to my knees. I saw her now. Not just as a spirit, but as a woman cast out, alone. Forgotten, consumed by rage that turned into darkness. She had made a terrible mistake, but she had paid for it 1,000 times over. So I did what no one else dared to do. I forgave her. I offered her a candle lit with my breath, a song from my grandmother's lips, and a vow. I will remember you. I will not bury your story in silence. And she wept. Not with tears, but with light. Her form dissolved like fog at dawn. The house groaned, the air shifted, and for the first time in decades, that land felt quiet. The ritual ended, but I was never the same. I left the house. But she left something behind. The silence that followed her departure wasn't empty, it was sacred. I stayed there until the sun crept up over the hills. Not a whisper, not a knock, not a single breath disturbed the air. It was as though the house itself had exhaled, releasing something ancient it had held for far too long. But you must understand, child. When spirits go quiet, it doesn't always mean they're gone. Sometimes it means they're listening, waiting, watching, and hoping that someone will carry their story, not out of fear but respect. I returned home with more than my suitcase. I returned with memory, not just of what happened, but of who I am. You see, we Romani carry our ancestors with us. In the way we tie our scarves. In the way we light candles on stormy nights. In the lullabies we hum to children who don't yet know why they feel afraid in the dark. I once thought our old ways were just traditions, charming relics of a life left behind. But they're not. They are maps. Maps for when the world loses its shape, for when the veil thins and something reaches through. The rituals, the songs, the whispers in our blood, they are protection, they are remembrance. They are home after that night. I tried to return to normal life, but normal had shifted. My home felt different, quieter, safer. Perhaps, but also watched. I could still feel her presence sometimes, in the corners of mirrors, in the flicker of candles when there's no wind. She doesn't haunt me. Not anymore. She reminds me that the choices we make echo down the line. That curses are not just punishments, they are memories that refuse to die. And that forgiveness, when truly given, becomes a bridge between the living and the forgotten. The scholar never asked for anything in return. He left me a letter written in ink the color of ash. The land sleeps again. But Zora, beware the day another forgets. You carry fire now. Don't let it go cold. I keep that letter in a box of salt and bone. Next to my grandmother's mirror. Next to the red cloth that binds the old symbols. Next to the small candle I light every year on the same night to honor the widow of shadows. Some say she was a monster. I say she was lost. And in helping her find her way, I found my own. I no longer fear the dark. I speak to it. I honor it. Because not all darkness is evil. Some of it is sorrow. Some of it is waiting. Some of it is us. So, if one day you find yourself in a place that feels too quiet, where shadows linger too long, and the wind carries names you do not remember speaking, pause, light a candle, speak gently. And listen, because you never know when an old soul is near, wanting not to harm, but to be heard.